Hello and welcome to this very special live edition of Because Language, a show about linguistics, the science of language. My name's Daniel Midgley, and with me now, my pal and podcasting partner for the past 27 years, it's Ben Ainsley. Ben, what's it been like doing this show for the last 41 years?
I like the new game of, since I've been getting it wrong, we'll just never ever get the right number. Like, we'll say every number but the right number. That's good. I like that. I can work with that.
And it's only going to get worse as the years roll on.
It's been a wonderful 13 years, and I look forward to 13 happy more.
Maybe for a while we'll just like really lowball it, and it'll be like 1 year.
My second year is going to be so good, you guys.
Can't wait for our second season of the show.
Me too.
Thank you for being here. Hedvig sadly can't be with us for this one. She is deep in wedding world. The real wedding this time.
Yes, the ceremony.
Does it seem like she's married the same guy 3 times?
COVID has caused us as a society to do a lot of weird things. I feel like on the spectrum, the ranking of like weird shit because of COVID, getting married multiple times is like entry level. This is like super basic COVID weirdness.
Yeah, it is, but that's a nice weirdness as well.
Yeah, oh, totally.
If you gotta have something weird happen, just get married a bunch of times. Nobody will know.
I wish nothing but love and like affection and all the good stuff, all the gooey, sentimental stuff for their like third wedding. I do wonder, and I've not had a chance to ask her this, she might be experiencing a bit of wedding fatigue by now. I'm not sure. A lot of people experience it in their first wedding, so
it's
by
terrible.
Number 3.
Weddings are hard, you know? Okay.
But look, we have compensated. Some might argue drastically overcompensated for her absence by packing in dozens of human beings to this show.
Yes, they are. They are here. We are having a great time talking with our great patron friends from Patreon. We already have a great time just throwing around topics on Discord, talking about language and social things and stuff. They bring us so many great stories and words that sometimes we like to have them all on and tell us about their stories and news in their own words. So that's what this episode is about. It's a potluck episode. If I say potluck, does that mean the same thing to everybody? Does anybody else have a different term for when everyone brings a dish? Feel free to unmute yourself. Fun, yeah, tell us what it is. Or, okay, Lord Mortis says bring and share. Okay. I don't know if that's official, but or did you just make that up? Anybody else? Is it potluck for everyone?
I've sometimes heard it called bring a plate as well.
Which causes no end of confusion for English learners or people from other places because
I've come with my empty plate.
Why did they not have enough plates?
These poor Westerners. Whatever is the problem?
Exactly. Okay, so potluck it is. So let's get started on the new. Wait, Ben, you got to do the thing. I can't do this properly.
Well, I think it is about time that we find out what's been going on in the world of linguistics in the week gone past.
Oh, those beautiful words. All right, our first story comes from Lord Mortis. Where are you, Lord Mortis? Unmute yourself and...
Getting my things ready.
There you go. There you go.
I'm organising my shit. Give me a second.
Very good. Nice to see the two of you. Let's see. So, new emoji... What's going on? We always love when the new emoji pop in.
Yeah, so I read Ars Technica pretty regularly, and an article popped up that because language's propensity for emoji hijinks, I thought would be interesting.
Emojinks.
And it's a list of potential new emoji, including one that caught my and the Ars Technica author's eye, a horrible goose. It's not specifically the horrible goose, but it is definitely a goose.
Okay. What makes the goose horrible? I wanted to know.
So there is a Australian game called Untitled Goose Game, which came out 2 years ago.
Oh.
And the tagline for the game is, "It is a lovely day in the village, and you are a horrible goose." And essentially, it's been called Metal Goose Solid, or a goose stealth action game in which you are a goose and you have to perform tasks which often cause people unrest in a village.
I love having played Untitled Goose Game. I really love how appropriate and deeply unhelpful those descriptions are. like,
Do you just waddle around and fuck shit up? Is that what's going
yes.
on? Okay.
Too much.
Very cool. All right, so I've got the list here, but what, Lord Mortis, was what was on your mind? Which one spoke to you? Which one do you think you'll be using?
I am there. So if you look at the picture attached to the article, there is the Wi-Fi symbol down the bottom, and there was one to the left of this Wi-Fi symbol, and I have no idea what that is. The rest of them make sense to me, although Kitty and I aren't sure whether the P one is specifically edamame or just peas in a pod in general. And the article does not really go into what that specific symbol is. They do go on to say that this is like a draft set. This is like a set that they're thinking about including. It hasn't been ratified. I'm sure you would know more about the emoji process than I do. But these are prospective new emoji.
I know that they're friggin' sick of it. They don't want to do it anymore. This is for version 15 of Unicode, and they've got 31 new emoji characters. That's not many. I think it's the smallest one that they've ever recommended at any given time. For some reason, I want to say that unknown symbol is something having to do with the Sikh religion, but I'm not. I could be getting that totally wrong.
No, it immediately fired off something for me as well, and I was trying to figure out in my head: is it Baha'i? Is it some kind of Persian? Is it Zoroastrianism? I feel like it is a religious symbol of some kind.
Help us out, people. We're really flailing here. We should get this right.
Also, the dumb whiteys.
There's the vibrating face or the shaking face. That I think that one's going to be, so in the proposal they have it like it could represent shaking in anticipation or excitement. I can't wait to see you. It could be disorientation. It could be emotionally shaken. I am shooketh.
Having just consumed a coffee, I feel like a lot of people are going to use it for overcaffeination.
That's a good point. Sorry, Ben, do you get shooketh over coffee? Like,
I don't at all, but I feel like it's at the point now, sort of pop culturally, where even though most people don't have a sincere or severe reaction to coffee and caffeine, we just all kind of claim we do. Like when you're on your third or fourth cup of the day, you'd be like, oh, I can't have another coffee because I'll start shaking. I don't, and I could have another cup of coffee. What I'm really saying is I would prefer not to have another cup of coffee now.
I can have 3 coffees and go to sleep.
Yeah, well, you are American. You guys have a different relationship to the coffee.
Yeah, but I used to be Mormon. That I had a really, really weird relationship to coffee.
True.
Anyway, other emoji that are in this set, high fives. I'm so glad that this pans together emoji is now unambiguously prayer, and we will have real high fives emojis. A moose head, a ginger root. Everyone loves that one, except me. Maracas, the Wi-Fi symbol. Can't believe we didn't have a Wi-Fi symbol. A jellyfish, and the aforementioned horrible goose.
I want to be clear to our listeners as well. It's just a goose.
It's just a goose. It could be a nice goose.
Yeah,
we don't know.
I mean, look,
our goose is nice. Our geese nice.
Look,
I
Lord
feel
Mortis
like the implication
is absolutely correct. Geese are an avatar of actual Satan. They are a deeply unlikable creature. I am not advocating that we harm geese in any way, but in the sort of hierarchy of animal interactions, when I am sort of like in the agricultural zone, if I come across a goose, they have right of way. Like, I am not fucking with geese. Yeah. They are definitely an animal that I'm just happy to give a wide berth to.
Swans are also satanic, but the thing is, if you run up against a swan, you came to their territory. You asked for this. So they're, I think, more relentless. Let's see. I'm still surprised that there's no cymbals. How am I supposed to make a joke and do a rim shot without a drum and a cymbal?
I did not understand which kind of symbol you meant. I'm like,
there's no symbols.
They're all symbols, Daniel. Literally,
they're all symbols.
Everything is a symbol.
Not necessarily. Some of them are iconic in the Persian sense.
Okay, fair enough. Yes, if we want to get into the semiotics, sign, signify, blah, blah, blah.
Does anybody else have any comments on the emoji? Unmute yourself and speak them now.
One word I've heard on streaming and so forth about the horrible goose is, I think, honkitude, which is a sort of really aggressive attitude that sometimes the goose really, really represents.
I feel like that needs to be not honkytude, because that could be like being the state of a honky like me, but maybe
It's definitely with an I. Honki.
How about honktitude to make the attitude more clear?
I like that.
I can't bend these things, but I'm trying to bend it a little bit.
It's gonna bleach anyway. You're gonna lose that extra syllable.
It's true.
Yeah. It's true.
Thank you, Ariaflame. Okay, it's time for our next story. We've got, I want to go to rude emojis and rude gestures and emoji from Tim.
Tim.
Tim. Oh.
I had a brother who served in Afghanistan, and he was laughing about the fact that news media were loving the fact that everybody over there was giving everybody the thumbs up and not knowing what it meant there.
Yep.
So what's the range here? The sit on this, or number one, or the best?
Yeah, it means everything. And apparently now, if you give two of them in a text, it means fuck off.
Right.
According to some story I read. And I was like, Holy cow. It seems it's getting used a lot more passive aggressively than I was expecting it to be.
And I wonder if that's a little bit like saying, if you say cool, that means it's cool. But if you say cool, that might mean it's not cool. And if you say, so you're going to be like that. Cool. The more cools, the more potentially sarcastic it is. So
good.
Tim is referencing an article from the mirror.co.uk. Not one of our usual stops. There are loads and loads of articles about how emoji mean different things in different places. Were there any others from that article that you noticed specifically?
No. There were a few that came up in another one. I'm an American, and but I do know enough to go like this in England rather than the other way.
Classic.
I'm sorry, for our listeners, it's the V shape with the first two fingers, and whether your palm is facing toward you or away from you makes a world of difference.
Sure does.
I've got to say, am I alone in that I just don't use gestures very much? Like any of these gestures? Like I don't throw up the peace sign. I don't give people the finger. I'm just not a very gestural person. Is that just me?
What about Emojily?
I don't know. There's one thing that I find that I use a lot more gestures while I'm on Zoom than I ever do while speaking. I correspond, speaking to somebody in the same room with me.
On Zoom, everyone's Italian.
Figure that out.
Well, and I could see why, because you've got a situation where in spoken conversation face to face, we're constantly going, whereas that can cause a train wreck or a little disconnect in Zoom speech. And so I notice I just tend to stay quiet a lot more and just be doing the hand gestures.
I also think I'm going to just completely contradict what I just said a second ago, which is something like the thumbs up, which I think in Western culture is pretty ingrained as like a kind of universal, right? A lot of people conceive of it as similar to like a nod or a shake. In a country where you might not know a whole lot of the language, a simple thumbs up to mean like okay or I assent or whatever is probably pretty common. So it is actually probably one of the few I think that could land you in a bit of hot water. Whereas some of the other stuff, I feel like, man, you'd have to get quite unlucky to be putting like a finger around and underneath and accidentally like insult this person's mother and all the rest of it. Whereas the thumbs up, I reckon, could probably, it could sink you relatively easily.
I've been in Australia for long enough that I've started to notice shifting in hand gestures. For example, people in the 80s used to point at the road to hitchhike.
Really? Thumbs down?
No, pointing with the index finger at the road like this, that meant I'd like a ride. Whereas I don't see a lot of hitchhikers anymore, but I noticed a bit of a shift toward actual thumbs up, which was a rude gesture in Australia, considered rude, and now much less so. I feel like the thumbs up in Australia. What do you find, Ben?
Oh, I'm clearly much younger than you because I have no conception of the thumbs up being a rude gesture in Australia.
Okay.
Like, sarcastically, like, is that what you mean? Like, if someone gives a thumbs up, it was like an Australian way of being like, oh yeah, good job, dickhead.
No, it was phallic.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
You learn something new every day.
And so it is in other places as well. I have this book called Rude Gestures of the World. I should have brought it. But anyway, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, I was just going to say, too, another article that I read indicated that thumbing a ride in Asia, rather, will tell the cars to keep on going.
Right.
They're not going to stop for you.
Just like pass on by.
Keep going. You get out of here. I'm not, yeah.
Yeah, I don't need help.
I don't know what's happening. I'm the worst hitchhiker ever suddenly. All right. I love how emojis can be misunderstood in the same way as real gestures can. You put them out there and then they go into the world in a worldwide audience and people might understand, maybe not.
And somehow that works that way with words as well.
Yeah, true.
True.
The classic grimace.
Thank you, Tim. Let's move on to a story about Twitter bots and accessibility. PharaohKatt, this one's yours.
Yep. Okay, so I found this one while on Twitter, so I guess that makes sense. Basically, Twitter has added an alt text feature, but it wasn't always easy to see if a picture had an alt text or not. So some users created this Twitter bot, which would troll through the picture, and if it had an alt text, it would just post it. If it didn't have an alt text, it would kind of post, say, look, there's no alt text here. And it was kind of like a nudge for people. Hey, there's no alt text here. Can you add the alt text, please? We can't read this. Yeah, I thought it was pretty neat anyway.
That's really cool.
Yeah, depending on what your client is, you might see the alt text button or you just might not at all.
Yeah. But I think the alt text button is also a relatively new one, so it didn't always exist even on the Twitter website or the Twitter official app, so that's pretty new as well. There's less use for the bot now than there used to be, but some users have said they're still finding it quite helpful, especially as like a prod to get people to add an alt text when there isn't one.
Yeah, I like that. I like that sort of, I can't help but feel like, and I'm not at all trying to denigrate the people who made this bot because I think they did a really cool thing, but it almost feels like pester power in marketing, right? Like when ads would target kids and then basically be like, pester your parents until they buy this thing for you. It feels like that. It's just like, hey, do an alt text, do it.
Do the thing.
I like it. It's effective.
This is from an article. The article that PharaohKatt is talking about is by Mia Sato in The Verge, and it's got another little tool that got invented. It's the alt text reminder. What it does is if you sign up for it, like I just did, it sends a private message to you if you post an image without posting alt text. Now, the funny thing about this article is that the two tools that have been mentioned are now both obsolete because Twitter now does this itself to, I think, everyone. If you post a message, it'll nag you about alt text, just like the alt text reminder bot will. So I just looked through the alt text reminders feed, and there was a message from alt text reader, the other one, saying, hey, welcome to the list of obsolete Twitter bots having to do with accessibility. But even though the features have been incorporated in Twitter itself, I'm still using them both just as a little reminder, just as a little nag to help me remember that accessibility matters.
I like it. There's
There's also people volunteering to do alt text, and they find images and then they do alt text, but there's a lot of churn there because people burn out. It's a nice thing to do.
There's a lot of pictures on the internet.
Oh my goodness.
That is a thing.
I still would love to have some kind of feature that would find, like, if you post an image and that image has been posted somewhere else with alt text, it will carry over your alt text.
Oh, like a bit of a tin eye sort of reverse image search type thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. Reverse alt text search.
I like that.
Yeah.
Get on
All
that.
right.
Get your progeny who do the coding to make that.
Come on, science. Did anybody have any other comments or PharaohKatt on that one?
Has anyone run across the feature, I think it's in PowerPoint, that uses ML? Like when you add an image into a PowerPoint these days, it automatically gives it an alt text. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it's as you might expect.
I have not heard of that one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I imagine as well Here's where my brain goes on these things because I'm such a fucking cynic. That much like YouTube's auto-generated captions, what Microsoft potentially is doing some like deep learning tutorializing of their AI. So when they put in a generated alt text and the user is like, oh fuck no, this is terrible, this is what it's supposed to be, they're slowly teaching the machine, aha, this is how you do this a little bit better.
Either that, or they're teaching the user to do the alt text properly.
Yeah, well,
in the first
you know
place.
what? Why not both?
Why not both?
Yeah, I was recently adding a lot of alt text because I was updating some lectures. So I was going through and finding all these images that did not have alt text on them and adding the alt text. And yeah, it's a job. But yes, I did notice some of the auto-generated ones, and they were generally minimal and not that helpful.
Okay, this will improve. This will improve over time.
We'll get the Star Trek computer eventually, guys.
Let's move on to our next one from seejanecricket. seejanecricket, are you here at the moment?
Yeah, I am.
Hey.
Morning, everyone.
Awesome.
Well, it's morning for me. Apologies.
Hi, multi-time zone every person.
Oh, sorry everybody for the timing. Yikes.
So this is a story in the category of the Chia Cheese renaming theme.
Yep.
Love
and
those.
apologies, I did end up going down a bit of a rabbit hole, so there's a few slight diversions. So I'm coming to you today from Naarm, also known as Melbourne. I live on Wurundjeri Woiwurrung land and pay my respects to elders past, present and future. And just want to say up front, I'm not Indigenous and have no special knowledge in this area, but was reading about that, and I think it's a really important part of our connection and reconciliation processes. One of the things I love about this particular renaming is it seems to have come from a proactive approach. So the council, local government area, they'll also be known as shires and counties in other countries to the north of me, pointing in a podcast, very helpful, was previously known as Moreland, and it is now being renamed Marybeck, which in the Woiwurrung language means rocky country. One of my diversions is that I was really excited to discover or rediscover, because it's possible I knew this and just forgot it, that Woiwurrung is one of the languages where Woi means no, so it's named after how they say no.
Yeah.
I noticed that. We talked about the no languages in an episode of Talk the Talk quite a while ago.
Yeah, so Boonwurrung is another one of those in the same region. So the reason it's been renamed is that Moreland was originally named that in 1839 after someone basically came and took the land and named it after a slave plantation in Jamaica that his ancestors had owned.
Oh, it's like a double nested awfulness.
Yeah, it wasn't.
Carry it over.
It wasn't officially named that until 1994, when the state government under, guess who, Jeff Kennett, merged a whole bunch of councils to form the new city of Moreland, a throwback to the colonial name for the land.
Right.
I was trying to find where the renaming impetus came from, and I don't really have a source for this, but the then Moreland Council were in a process of reconciliation with the local Indigenous people, and it seems to have come out of those conversations, which I really like. So it doesn't come from outrage or a social media campaign or anything. It's actually been brought to them by the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung elders, who gave the council three options for a new name. Wa Dam Book, meaning renew, Marybeck, meaning rocky country, and Jarang, meaning leaf of tree. So Marybeck, they did various consultations and a vote, which they seem to have managed fairly well because they didn't get any nonsense options, meaning, so rocky country came, or Marybeck came in at 59%. Only 6% of people voted for no change at all. So I think it's actually a great story.
Nice. Wow.
94% of the people in the area wanted to change the name, and it's come from a proactive position of reconciliation rather than a sort of outrage, acknowledging that sometimes outrage and attention is how you get things changed. And I just wanted to finish with a quote from the mayor the name of the city is of fairly important significance and symbolism to the city. And if it's excluding somebody, why would you want to keep it? Which is also just such a great common sense approach. So there you go. The area to the north for me is now Marybeck.
Nice.
I really agree with you. The idea that like we're starting to see systems begin to change. Look, and I don't want to overblow it, right? Like we don't want to. The worst thing, not the worst thing, but like a not great thing to do is to go, oh look, they've changed this name. Like let's dust our hands off. All good,
we're done,
right? Yeah. But I completely agree with you. The idea that there is some level of systemic and iconographic change that's taking place without people having to like piss and moan for years and years and years and just burn themselves out saying the same thing over and over and over again until finally someone goes, oh, maybe we could change the name. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, yay, they changed the name. Meanwhile, the people who did all the work are sitting there being like, yeah, overnight success, no worries. And it sounds like if you sort of read between the lines of what you were just saying, it sounds like it probably just came to light in the procedure of a reconciliation process, right? Like the council went, we are going to engage in a reconciliation process. And in that process, the traditional owners went, well, I mean, you change the name to one of these things. And the council were like, bloody great idea. Okay, let's do it. That's awesome. That's exactly how a good reconciliation process ought to work, I imagine.
Does anyone get the impression that maybe Marybeck was the winning option, possibly because it also started with M? Like I looked at the three options and I thought, which one of these could I remember? And I found that if I was going from Moreland to Marybeck, that's less of a jarring sort of switch. I just wonder if the first letter had any salience there. That's just a guess.
I did wonder about that. And actually, I was out with a friend recently in that region and she went to say the name and she said Marybeck and then was like, is that right? That sounds like the right one. And I was like, yeah, because it's got the same... I couldn't remember the specific word, but I could remember that had the same sounds in it. So, yeah.
Just enough to start you off.
What were the three choices again? I'm hearing Mary Beth, and I know it's not that. And I'm just wondering if that was part of why it's more familiar to us already, because it sounds like a name we already recognize.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. It's got Mary in it, for sure.
What were the other two?
The other two were Wa Dam Book and Jarang. I'll put them in the chat. I've got the spellings, and they very helpfully came with pronunciations as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the more familiar, the more similar sound. I mean, it's just kind of the way we're wired. I mean, I should be able to remember somebody's name if it sounds super different from the ones I'm used to, but it's hard sometimes with Marybeck. You know, it's got the Mary in it, which you could reanalyze incorrectly as being English.
I reckon Jarang would have been able to fly pretty easily as well, simply because it's familiar in a different way, because we've got so many places that still do have Indigenous names sort of all across, especially rural Australia. I think Jarang, it certainly sounds quite familiar to me. Like I feel like maybe there's already a place called Jarang, possibly.
Just another piece of context, apologies, but the Mary Creek, so I'm trying, it's got that Australian schwa in it, but it's Mary, Merri. I'm pointing again because it's just over there a couple of blocks, but flows through this whole region of Melbourne and down into the Yarra. So the Mary in Marybeck is the same word. And so for a lot of people, it's also associated with the region. So that's another association.
That'll do it.
There we go. Yeah, that'll definitely do it.
Definitely.
That'll get her done.
Well, that's great. I'm really pleased to hear that that's happening, and without a lot of people being weird about it. So that's awesome. Thank you, seejanecricket. Really appreciate that. Okay, now we are going to hear one from Lena, who isn't in the chat right now, but she did send us a recording via SpeakPipe. So I am going to share a thing. Here I go. Okay. This is about name change as well in the wonderful world of cookery.
Hey peeps, it's Lena from the Discord. So I just wanted to talk about renaming of some cookies. In the Netherlands, I'm not Dutch myself, but I've lived here for almost a decade now. So the other day, I went to the grocery store and got myself some cookies, as you do. And I saw some cookies on the shelf, and they were called Jodenkoek, which means Jew cookies. Doesn't even mean Jewish cookies, because that would be Joodse koek. And I was kind of confused, and I had been listening to a bunch of the early episodes about the renaming stuff, so I decided to look them up a bit more online. And apparently those kind of cookies have been around for a long time, like at least since the 1880s. Some other sources say like 1740. But apparently they became Jewish cookies when this Jewish baker made them first in a specific way, and he sold the recipe to some cookie company. And they're like flat, round cookies, mostly flour, butter, sugar, like really simple cookies. So other people also think they might be called Jewish cookies because bad quality or cheap things were often called like Jewish whatevers. So that's something to also keep in mind, maybe. So in 2021, one of the biggest makers of this type of cookie, like really traditional big brand name, decided to rename them and call them Odekoek instead of Jodekoek. So basically just drop the J at the beginning. And ode in this case means the same as the English ode, like a tribute or a celebration. And they chose the name because it sounded similar to the original. And they say they didn't actually rename the cookies because they got any backlash, but because they themselves felt like it didn't represent their values of diversity and inclusivity and stuff like that, and wasn't of the times anymore. So when they were thinking about renaming them, they actually did a survey, and apparently mostly younger people agreed that the name should be changed. And they informed the head of the Jewish Council in the Netherlands, and that person said that they never took any offense to the name, and that this renaming might be a little too cautious, but they did really appreciate it nonetheless. And they did also say that the Jodekoek 1 isn't actually that Jewish because it's not kosher, apparently. But also, what I said earlier, it's not actually a Jewish cookie, because that would be Joodse. It's just Jew cookie. So it wouldn't even be grammatically correct. And apparently there's another company who's been thinking about renaming those cookies as well. And they're still in the process of doing it, but they say they have only had like one question about the name in the last 2.5 years. So who knows? I did see that there was a bit of backlash on Twitter about, woke PC culture gone too far, that even the cookies need to be renamed. The original name is still out there a lot, like all of the generic brand supermarket versions still have the same old Jodekoek name, and I don't feel like there's enough cultural animo to change any of that. It doesn't seem like people are getting offended about it, and if even the head of the Jewish Council says it's nice that they want to be inclusive, but this name hasn't bothered us, I don't know if it will actually change, but I can't wait to hear what you all think about that and the whole renaming process.
Okay, so that was from Lena. I'm sensing a theme here that some of these things are coming about not because of external pressure, but just naturally, as more and more things change. Maybe it's gaining momentum.
I want to ask if anyone in our Discord is fluent in Dutch, because I have a question about Dutch and the usage of the Dutch language. Do we have any Dutch speakers, like fairly nuanced, understanding Dutch speakers?
Nope.
I'm going to give it a second. Because whenever a question like this happens in a communal setting like this, someone's always like, oh, wait, fuck, how do I unmute? But no, I'm guessing by now that the answer is no. Because what I wanted to know, and I'd like to open this up to everyone, is I can't be alone in sensing how the word Jew is becoming more and more sort of charged in English, right? In the sense that depending on tone, inflection, and context, Jew can absolutely be used as a unit, as a word, in a pretty harsh and disrespectful way. And it can also be used in a completely sort of neutral, this is the noun that describes a person who belongs in this category. And I'm just wondering if the same thing is true in Dutch, because Jew cookie in English I don't know about anyone else, but I get like a little bit of whoa, that's a little bit that's intense. Like there's a little part of me that goes, is that how we should be? Should we? I don't know. That doesn't seem right.
No.
So that's kind of my question: is in Dutch, is Jew occupying the same sort of semantic space, essentially, where the word Jew can actually really kind of rub in a kind of aggressive way, depending on how it's used?
Mm.
But no one can answer that question, so I've just been talking to myself for like 3 minutes.
If I can comment, I think, Ben, not to do a live fact check, because again, I'm not a historian or anything, but I think actually we've been lucky enough to live in a brief period of history where Jew hasn't always had a negative connotation in our life experience.
Yeah.
Based on what I have read, mainly fiction, for a long time, you know, you think of Merchant of Venice in Shakespeare's time, for example, it has had that connotation. And even I could hear the allusion in English anyway, and I don't know enough about Dutch to know, but anti-Semitism is international, so I imagine it's the same. I've been trying to think of if there's another analogy, because there are some people and cultures you associate with being stingy or cheap. So Scots, for instance, can have a reputation of being stingy, but it doesn't have nearly the same level of negativity and bias and weight of history, I suppose, behind it, from my perspective.
Ariaflame? Let me get you.
Yeah. Yes, sorry. Yes, I'm originally from Scotland, though you cannot tell that from my accent. I am fully aware of this. This is what happens when you grow up in a navy town. You get a very neutral BBC British accent.
Okay, so let's see. The other thing that I noticed about this was that having a name that's kind of similar to the one that you just had, like Cheer Cheese, for example, you know, that helps people to cling on to the new name and can facilitate. So maybe that's something for renamers to think about, that if you can find something that's kind of similar, kind of analogous, it helps.
And another thing to sort of, I think, probably acknowledge, and I'm sure many of our sort of patrons who are here with us today and many of our listeners are aware of this, but some people might not be, is that like many countries around the world, the Netherlands is going through sort of a period of inward sort of reflection and analysis of some of their cultural practices, which are pretty fucking problematic, to do with like Christmas and blackface and a bunch of other things.
Holy
and
shit.
So I'm not trying to sort of rule one way or another, but just provide the context that in the Netherlands, there is a conversation that's been happening about how you refer to other cultures in a way that is respectful and not harmful. And a lot of Dutch people, like, I don't want to paint the picture that like all Dutch people are like, oh, it's fucking PC madness gone wrong. There's a lot of Dutch people who are really on board with the idea that like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do things that are just overtly disrespectful to other people, even if it's something that we've done for a long time. So that context probably matters when we look at this idea of a company sort of maybe really jumping forward and trying to be quite proactive about this thing, almost to the point where people from that community are like, it wasn't a problem, but okay, cool, no worries. You know, there is a larger context around that in the Netherlands, which is why some of that stuff might be happening there specifically.
Thanks to Lena for that. And I suppose I should say what I always say when it comes to renaming things. We can't just rename things and call it done. We need to be aware that there's only so much you can do with language as far as racism and sexism in a profoundly racist and sexist culture. Just changing the words for things won't necessarily get you all the way there. But I think we're in the middle of an exciting period of change where people are really looking at the way we use language. Hey, that's what we do. To look at how we refer to people, the exonyms, the endonyms, how are, product names, team names, how are we portraying other people? How, it's a question it's a tale as old as time. It's been with us since Beauty and the Beast. How do we refer to people? How do we relate to people who are different from ourselves? We don't like what we don't understand. In fact, it scares us. So the fact that we're in this moment
Only
where we
fucking you would figure out how to bring a musical theater into this fucking shit. Oh my
at
God.
least. It's not even in my range. You know, Gaston is very anyway. So I'm glad that we're in this moment where we can, push this along and maybe do some good. So thanks, Lena. All right, now we're over to Ditte talking about language, neuropsychology, and cognition. Ditte, you're a neuropsychologist. Could you tell us about what you do?
I've been thinking about something since I've been listening to this podcast. I've been hearing a lot about all this debate about Chomsky and this language, universal grammar thing, or is it something more to do with general cognition and, thing where Chomsky did language maybe has more to do with structuring internal thought than with communication. And when I'm work as a neuropsychologist and do cognitive evaluations when people have had some brain damage or if they think they might have dementia and they need a cognitive assessment. And when I've been doing my work, I've been thinking a lot about how personally I view language as something that is built on more general cognition things, and I think language is primarily for communication and not for structuring thought. But even so, in my work I see a lot about how both cognition affects language, but also how language affects cognition, both of them really. I can give you an example. I was doing this evaluation of a woman who was suspected of having dementia, and one of her major symptoms was language related. She had trouble finding words, mainly nouns, also some others. So she would have to, forget the word. Maybe she would forget the word table, and then she had to explain it in other ways. That was one of her major symptoms, but also a bit of other things. And she had been to the doctors at the hospital where I work, who do this cognitive screening with a tool called the MMSE, just a short cognitive screening. And they were rather puzzled because both this woman and her daughters said that in her everyday life she was actually doing quite well. She was managing to do everyday stuff and communicate with her family reasonably well and remembered things she had to do. But when they did this short cognitive screening, she performed really, really badly, not only on the things that were directly about language, but also on some of the memory tasks and things. They were sort of puzzled because how can that be? Both can't be true. And so she went for further evaluation with me, more in-depth cognitive evaluation. And what I found was that she could remember things well, but it was really blocking things for her when she couldn't put it into words, when she had just some random list of words, something that didn't mean anything to her, that didn't have a context for her, then she couldn't think of other words to describe them if she couldn't find the words. Whereas in everyday life, if there was something she wanted to say, then she had the whole context of what that was about, and thus she had a way to find other words. And I did, among other things, a little task that's meant to make things more like everyday, where you ask the person to remember something, but you are telling them they have to pretend that we're going to the supermarket together, and these are the things that we want to buy, and we had have a little chat about that, and she performed perfectly well there. She could remember them because we had this little talk, and that meant she had said stuff like, cooking oil, I never buy that, and that meant she had some context she could use to say, I can't remember the word, but that thing I never buy, or stuff like that. So it was really, really hard for her to do some cognitive tasks, and I think that this has to do with the way our cognition is generally often geared towards communicating stuff to others because that's really important to us. And that means that if we do things like memorizing random lists of words such and such, we don't do that to use that in internal thought. We do that with the with the intent of later communicating it to someone else. So even though language is meant for communication, it still really affects cognition, because the cognition was meant in order to facilitate this communication, and when the language doesn't work the same way, then it's really hard.
This is one of the areas that I find really fascinating, language and the brain. The brain is an extremely complex place. If it were simple enough for us to understand, then we wouldn't be able to use our simple brains to understand it.
Ditte, can I ask you, in your role as a person who is sort of working with this cognitive evaluation and analysis of say this individual and other individuals, intuitively when you're telling this story about a sort of, and I'm just going to recap it really briefly just to make sure I've got it right, a elderly woman who is suffering from dementia or Alzheimer's, who can function very, very sort of capably in her everyday life, communicate with her family and her close network and get by without basically any real problems. But when assessed on this very specific analysis tool, performs very, very poorly. Intuitively, my brain kind of goes, is this just evidence of the sort of really significant adaptability and plasticity of everyone's brain, right? So she is suffering from this inability to recall very specifically a large group of nouns and some other words. But when given the opportunity to kind of stretch her cognitive legs, for a terrible kind of metaphor, she actually has a lot of really helpful and capable workarounds that allow her to navigate around these voids in her memory. Is that kind of what you are seeing happening, or is there something else at work?
Yeah, partly that, but also I think it shows that something about the limitation of the tools we use. The same tools that could be problematic in such a case are also sometimes problematic when you're testing people who come from different cultures, and especially if in those cultures it's common not to have a lot of education, not to go to school at all, or only a little bit, because doing some formal education really, really shapes our cognition, and it shapes how we use language too. Doing more academic stuff like remembering long lists of things, or remembering your times tables, or something like that. That's something you need to go through as a child to have in order for your cognition to be shaped into doing that, because you learn to do the things that are important to you in life. But if people don't do education, then they do things that they learn to think in ways that they need in their everyday life. And that's actually an example that was made quite a long time ago by one of the pioneers within neuroscience, really, a Russian guy named Alexander Luria. And he did some research where he was studying categorization and, like odd one out test, which ones goes together and which one is the odd one out. And for most people he studied and who had some education, or at least just regular primary school, but had schooling, they would group together things that were alike, like group all the animals together or the tools together. In that way, that probably comes natural to most of us too. But when he went out to these really rural areas where people didn't really have really hadn't gone to school much, then people would group things together by what was used together. So the cow would go together with the stool to sit on when you milked it, and the bucket to get the milk in, instead of going with the other animals. And the point is that this wasn't wrong. This was the way to categorize things that made sense in their everyday lives, and they had never been in a setting where the other way made made sense. And this means that we really need to be careful what we think of as normal and what kind of tools we use.
It sounds like what we're sort of now approaching, or not even approaching, now what we're squarely in, is this idea of accessibility within research. Because I imagine it has to be a very complex question to answer, right? The scientific method is a fairly exacting thing, but at the same time, as you've just really articulately described, we are an incredibly fallible culture, certainly in the West, in terms of the acknowledgement and celebration of, and even just understanding of, different levels of, as you've said, education, but also many other things, neurodivergence, sort of physical, quote-unquote, ability, right? We still come from a very archaic understanding of the human condition, and that archaicness, great language, Ben, keep going, is sort of infiltrated into every level of what we undertake, even supposedly very highly educated fields of study. I think it's a really interesting idea of how we dismantle and understand better exactly what you've described, right? So a person from a rural background who is categorizing different from us doesn't lack the ability to categorize. They do it differently, and we need to understand that if we are to assess those people.
Yep.
Within neuropsychology, there's actually some work being done in order to develop more cross-cultural tests that work across cultures, or at least only have a small bit of cultural bias. And that's great for neuropsychology, for those evaluations, and even though we still need more of those, but as long as you're studying people in some way where you need to take these things into account in the tools you use. I think that's really important.
Okay, thank you for bringing that issue to us, and thanks to everyone who has brought things so far. Now, it's time for a new segment that we're going to have ongoingly, courtesy of a brand new sponsor for the show. I teased on Discord that we have a new sponsor, so it's time to reveal who it is. Folks?
I saw you press something and I was like, is he cueing an actual drum roll? Is that what's about to happen? I'm so glad you didn't. Thank you.
No, I would just stick a drum in chat, drum emoji in chat, right? Folks, it's the Oxford English Dictionary.
What?
The definitive record of the English language. They got in touch, we worked it out, and it's a real honor to have them roll with us. So, instead of this segment being an ad that we read, which would be really boring.
Super boring.
This segment is going to take the form of a game, and we want you to play along.
Yes. Hedvig's not here for me to destroy, so obviously this game is suboptimal, but I will enjoy it nonetheless.
Yeah, but nonetheless, we want everybody to participate as well in the form of a poll. I've got a poll all queued up and ready to go. What's going to happen is the game is related or not. I'm going to give you 2 English words, and you have to tell me if they are related or if the similarity between them is merely coincidental.
One of our Discord patrons, when I floated the idea of this game being called Yeah or Nah, very appropriately checked me and said, now, if we were going to use it in Australian English, it would be yeah, nah, or nah, yeah.
I'm confused now.
Oh, it's the other Ben. It's the not host Ben. Sorry, thank you, Ben. Yeah, Ben very properly was like, oh, bro, your lack of Australianness is showing.
Okay, so to find out whether these words are related or not, we're going to be using information from the Oxford English Dictionary, the definitive record of the English language. As you know, Ben, the etymological information in the OED is second to none. So, here we go. The words are the word utter and the word utter, as in, Ben called me an utter cockwomble, and I was too surprised to utter a word. Do they come from the same place, or is the similarity between them coincidental? Now, first of all, this is the part where we kick it around. Nobody look up anything. Don't use it yet. If you do look it up, don't comment. But this is the part where we can say, maybe or maybe not. Ben, initial impressions.
My gut, my stomach, which of course is the seat of all language knowge,
cognition.
Immediately went, yeah, nah. Which for our non-Australian listeners is a no. I feel like just intuitively, no. Because English has pilfered so much from so many places, I reckon this is an example of one thing being, I'm going to say, Scandi, right? So like a Viking kind of loan word type situation, and then something from a completely different sort of linguistic tree. I reckon there's two families that have ended up being like similar.
Okay. That's Ben's. Is that your guess, or let's listen to what anybody else has?
That's my tum-tum. That's what my tum-tum says.
It's okay to change that. Anybody got any input? What do you reckon? Unless you've looked it up.
I haven't looked it up. The chat told me to put my dictionary back on the shelf, so I've done that.
Yeah, that's it.
Put it away.
Put that thing away.
I'm going to say no because I'm thinking about domains of meaning. So one is like the outer, the utter, the extreme, the outermost realms, and the other one is an utterance, a sound, something that comes out. So I'm coming at it from that angle.
Cool.
Semantically,
Okay.
They're semantically fairly distant.
Okay. Anybody else?
Do we have any yeses?
Yeah, anybody who thinks, I think they might be related because they share something.
I can see how they might be related. In that one is to give out an utterance, and the other might be the outermost. If they've changed in pronunciation over time, they could both be related to out.
Okay,
I like
interesting.
That. Yep.
Yeah. Are you being swayed by Ben?
Not yet, but what other Ben has alluded to is a thing that I didn't really account for, which is the idea that there's a linkage that could be kind of lost to time, right? Like the idea that your name is related to like midges, right? Like this, like biting gnat insects. The idea that linkage exists is just super. Like I would never have guessed that. So I'm allowing for the fact that I am stupid and not very knowledgeable about history.
Let's put up the poll, and everybody except Ben, feel free to vote. There we go. Votes are rolling in. It's
neck and neck.
Look at this.
Yes, no is winning,
but only by a hair.
Yep.
Okay, 12 people out of 13 of us have voted. It's me.
It's probably me as well.
It's okay. I'm going to end the poll. As you can see, 42% yes, 58% no. Now it's time for the answer. The answer is related.
Oh, Ben, not the host one, should probably become the host one.
According to the Oxford English Dictionary, they share. The words have bounced around a little bit and they've been influenced by other words, but they do share the same origin, and it relates to the word out or ut. Utter.
Ben's got it!
Ben's got it.
He was right on the fucking money! Wow, good job.
There. So the utter is the outer or even the utmost. So when someone is an utter biscuit, they are the most out there form of biscuitry there is. And when we utter an utterance, we speak it out. We put it out there. Like I say, other words have contributed to both of these, but they both share out as an etymon.
I'm doing, like, I'm not going to do it, but I'm miming a slow clap. That was really impressive.
So insane. Other Ben, not the host, wins this episode of...
Brava!
Of yeah, no, or no, yeah. In chat, I am noticing that there's a lot of udder related. Oh, what the hell? Let's just figure out whether udders on a cow. I think not. I think that's going to be some...
I don't know. Milk comes out of him.
Milk. No. According to Oxford, the pendulous baggy organ provided with 2 or more teats or nipples by which the milk is secreted in certain female animals. It doesn't seem to have out as one of those things. It just seems to be one of those, that's the word for that thing. That's what we call that thing.
Maybe related to the word under?
Nope, not showing up. Just there was an udar or uber. Wait a minute.
Hang on. What's this?
You know what?
Enhance. Enhance.
This is getting weird, so I'm going to stop reading that entry.
Okay.
But we'll play another round of this next time. Remember, for all your word-related info, that's the Oxford English Dictionary, the definitive record of the English language.
Hey, thanks so much for sponsoring us, OED. And Daniel, when you got all out of sorts about me threatening to stab a bunch of people for the OED, all I can say is, proof's in the pudding, my friend. I offered my services, and they want me to stab people. So OED, you just let me know.
They loved it.
They thought that
was great. Yep.
I get stabby.
Okay, now it's time for our words of the week, and we are starting with one from PharaohKatt. What you got?
Okay, so my word this week is precariat. Precariat.
Oh, surely, Ben.
So...
No? Okay, go on.
No.
Okay. I found it via Twitter, via one of the speeches that I follow. Apparently it's been used previously, but I'd never heard it. But this was based on a conversation article about actually New Zealand. But the article is, for many New Zealand scholars, the old career paths are broken. Our survey shows the reality for this new academic precariat.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So it means a kind of an environment or a system that is endemically precarious?
Yeah, that's kind of it. So it's like a combination of like proletariat and precarious. So it's people who are maybe living paycheck to paycheck. They're living precariously. So it's like a class of people is the precariat.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's people who are working like gig economy or who don't have a lot of job security, like academics right now, especially in Australia where the funding to universities is just down. Yeah, so precariat. That's my word of the week.
That's a good one, and I think it's a really appropriate word for. I'm seeing it a lot in America, possibly because so much of our media comes from there, but just the idea of the hustle, right? Like so many people now have to engage in so many different, quite stressful realities to just get life done. The security of a paycheck that you can just rely on being there for a lot of people is just a rarer and rarer thing. And so there being a word to describe this entire sort of end stage capitalism dysfunction is good and really sad.
I took a look at other words ending in at, or actually Ariat, because there's a search engine called Lots of Words that allows you to look at words by the way they begin or they end. It's really good. Drop a link on becauselanguage.com for this show page. Other words ending in at were things like, of course, proletariat, punditariat, commentariat, which is cute because it's got commentary in it, the militariat, and then the salariat and the welfariat, as well as the precariat.
Is triumvirate in there? Not really, is it?
Not really, because it's got an E ending. And the interesting thing about that is that, according to the OED, in Old French, the Latin had words that ended in atus and atum, like the senatus and avocatus, which means the lawyers. In Old French, they ended up as at, A-T, but in English, we usually gave them an ate, like senet and advocate. But some words kept the at ending from French, like proletariat. So I think what this word is doing, precariat, is borrowing from that sense of a unified group of people who belong to a social class and the inescapability of the social immobility of getting out of that class. So I think precariat shares in that sense, and that's why this is a good way of ending that word.
Very, very good word. I like it.
It appears to have come, first instance in the OED is 1989.
Wow.
From M. Harrington in a book called Socialism, a tract called Socialism. Here's the money quote: "A precariat of casual workers, participants in the underground economy." Wow.
A lot older. A lot older.
Yeah. 1989 that was published. So that's a good one. Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next one from Aristemo. You've got one for us.
And so I do. Can you hear me?
Yep,
we
sound
can.
good.
Okay, cool. So I came across this one pretty recently. Something uplifting for a nice change. News. This one is climate optimism. So it seems to be trending a fair amount on TikTok, and I kind of see it as a rejection or even kind of post-despair of how maybe millennials and other generations are experiencing, or considering climate change. Instead of this idea of getting stuck in or trapped in the, damn, we're all doomed, the climate's going to shit and all of that, it's the positive idea that actually we can do something about this. Let's get out there and do it. Let's focus on the good news. Let's spread that. It's not a denial of the bad things out there, but it's just let's change this. We can fix this. We're not all doomed. Climate optimism.
I am myself a climate optimist. I think that there are a lot of indicators that are at last pointing the right way as far as renewable energy and as far as, depending on the country you live, the political voting patterns that are happening. I'm encouraged by at least Australia. So, and also I think climate doomerism is not very helpful. So a video that says this really well is a new one by Kurzgesagt.
God, that the best videos and the most annoying name.
I'm having a hard time. I didn't even bother looking at what it means because I just like it. But they have a video, "We Can Solve Climate Change," in which they point to there's no time for complacency. We've got to buy, invest, and vote appropriately. But a lot of indicators are turning around, and that's a good thing.
I want to be a climate optimist. I really do. I really, really do. And then I find it really hard because in my bones and my shard of obsidian that I have in place of a heart, I struggle so much because I just see so many people in power doing so many fucking stupid things and just being like, oh, well, like the political, there's not enough bravery in leadership. And I just want a Paul Keating to come along and just be a bit of a dad or a woman being a mum or something like that, right? Where they just go, right, that's it. You've fucked around for long enough. We're fixing this problem and it's going to suck and it's going to not be very fun for a while, but we all got ourselves here and now we have to pay the price. And that's just how it goes. I just want someone to do that and to say that.
Yeah.
I feel like there needs to be, to balance the optimism is just like a stern school marm who's going to come in and just be like, this is what's happening.
Well, I think so too. But of course, school marms and school masters are not popular. And
yes, well,
what I'm seeing is that while, like, I'm a progressive, I really do believe that governments can make positive changes, but governments right now are mired in squabbling and bad actors like Joe Manchin in the USA. And you know what I see? I don't want to be this free marketeer libertarian weirdo. I see the free market just doing it. Just like we're seeing solar, we're seeing batteries, we're seeing electric vehicles. There are challenges, but these things are pulling in line and they're going in the right direction. And I think if this happens, it's going to show how useless government can be and how good people making economic decisions can be.
Bring on democratic lotteries, I say.
I think a lot of industries are also just realizing that it's more cost effective to switch to renewables in a lot of ways, especially in the long term. And when you consider logistics, going electric makes a hell of a lot more sense. If you think about the returns you get on coal in terms of energy and production, like things aren't necessarily going green because they have the best values in mind. I think a lot of it is just the cost benefit for them, but fuck it, I'll take it.
Yeah. Like if the man I hate is doing a thing I don't hate, okay.
Full disclosure, I have a significant stake in Tesla, so I just want to put that out there. seejanecricket, can I read your comment in chat? Doomerism is also used by interested parties to actively prevent change. Yes, climate change is real, but it's too late. Let's focus on mitigation instead and keep digging up coal. I like that comment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
the solution is definitely not burning a shitload more coal. Like, let's just put that out there.
How about that?
No version of a good outcome to what we're facing.
There's a lot of improvements in energy efficiency and in renewable energy, which do basically make things cheaper in the long run. And certainly the bigger companies can often see long-term improvements as being, we'll have to invest something now, but we're going to be reaping it in the future.
Part of that,
I think, area of research.
Oh, right. Okay, cool.
Or teaching anyway.
PharaohKatt, I would love to hear your sort of perspective, or like the results of your research on this. Is that a lot of this would, I imagine, have to come down to the culture of leadership in large business organizations, right? Because in different times and places in sort of business history over the last 50 years, there have been swings and pendulums into like, okay, we need short-term gains. We need them on the books now. We need profit stat. And then there's been other times where like sound stewardship comes into vogue, essentially. And people go, we're going to build a good reality for this company 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. Do you see a lot of that? My area of teaching more than research these days is I think I saw PharaohKatt putting her hand up, and then that was underneath Ariaflame, so I just conflated the two. My bad.
Yeah, I had a comment related to the subject, but not a research comment. So anyway.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I was just thinking that I follow Dr. Carl on Twitter, and he's often posting about how we actually do have the answers. We have the technology; it exists. What we lack is the political will to put it into place.
Although the last election did indicate at least some movement towards some
political will.
All right, let's go to Ben, not the host one. We've all seen wonderful pictures lately from wonderful space.
So my word that I'm bringing this week is the Just Wonderful Space Telescope.
Ah, yes. As opposed to the James Webb Telescope. Who was this James Webb character anyway?
Yep. So for a bit of history, the telescope that's giving us all these wonderful images this week was first proposed back in 1996. Was when the project to launch it started. So it's been going for 26 years.
Can you imagine the feelings and the emotions of some of these people 26 years down the line when some of these images, it must be transcendent emotionally. I can't even imagine.
So for the first 8 years of that project, it was just referred to as the Next Generation Space Telescope. And then in 2002, the then administrator of NASA, Sean O'Keefe, apparently after discussing it with a few astronomers and getting no pushback, decided that it would be named after James Webb. So James Webb was the administrator of NASA from 1961 to 1968. So in the sort of the key
space race,
Apollo space race era. But this naming has been controversial, particularly among the LGBTQ plus community. And there was an op-ed published in Scientific American last year by a group of 4 people who were drawing attention to James Webb's history, first at the State Department, where he was the second in command. And during sort of his tenure there were a lot of firings of LGBTQ plus people.
He milkshake ducked.
And then following this sort of environment at the State Department, sort of there was a Senate committee, which has been referred to as the Lavender Scare. Something I didn't actually realize until I started reading about this last night is that Joseph McCarthy was actually part of some of these committees. Yes, and there's also some stories about, sorry, I don't have the name to hand, some people fired from NASA while James Webb was the administrator.
And so if you're not a fan of James Webb, you can call it the Just Wonderful Space Telescope.
Also, there was a bit of a Twitter thread going on the Just Wonderful was coined, as far as I can tell, by Chanda Prescott Weinstein, who's a astrophysicist, I think at the University of New Hampshire at the moment. And she was one of the people who wrote that op-ed. But there's a bit of a Twitter thread going on. Some other suggestions was the Jelescope Wellescope Space Telescope.
Love it. Huge fan.
That's the best since Bodie McBoatface. We thought that was great.
It trumps, I think.
Way better.
It is better than, Jelescope Wellescope Space Telescope is delightful.
Yes. Lord Mortis, what do you got?
A number of science fiction awards were named after people who turned out to also be milkshake ducks. And it finally came to the conclusion where, in that community at least, I don't know who coined this, but I heard it on Galactic Suburbia, stop naming awards and things after people because it's just easier that way.
Let's call them nebulas and other sciencey things.
Just don't have heroes.
So one thing I found, after the decision was made not to rename it, this is also an executive decision taken by Bill Nelson, who's the current NASA administrator.
The former congressperson?
Yes, the one who went to space.
Okay.
Yep. So Alex Witz, who's a reporter at Nature, did a FOIA request and received 400 pages of emails from inside NASA about this decision.
Oh no!
And there's I probably don't recommend you read them. But very early on, the historian at NASA, so this is like early 2021 when they started talking about the possibility of renaming it. He's found in one of his emails, he says, recommendation, don't change the name at this point. Stop naming things after people, he says, half joking.
Yep.
So that's a quote directly from the NASA historians.
Wow. That's it. That is amazing. How prescient.
Okay. Tell you what. Thank you for that. I love that. Except you got to say it with a little bit of emphasis on space. The Jelescope Wellescope Space Telescope. Okay, let's go on to Tim.
So I found ubi used to mean vanilla, and I was really surprised and just didn't know if it was a thing or not. Ubi used to mean out-of-box experience, at least when I started with computers in the 90s. And it was that rush that you got when you open something up, and it was the out-of-box experience of this new toy that you've got. And just a couple of weeks ago, I found text on some systems, ubi Windows renders a bit too big, so we made this window resizable. It means vanilla Windows. It means
just
your
out of the
basic
box.
Windows.
So just to be clear as well, because if anyone else is like me and they hear vanilla, they think it means boring specifically. Like vanilla means very, very plain, as opposed to like default, which I think is how it's being used here, right?
Here we go.
It is being used as default because, yes, the Bare Naked Ladies are correct. Vanilla is the finest of the flavors.
That is a great callback. I love it.
But I was just really surprised to see that. And that was just, that's all I had with it. Really was just like, that was a lot of shift. But come to think of it, it has been, 30 years in the 90s, 20 years, 30 years in the 90s.
I do have to say that I love a good out-of-box experience. I have this thing where I save all the boxes for all my products, all my computer products.
Have you seen the TikTok, Daniel?
No.
There is a TikTok where a youngish person basically looks at the camera and basically goes, to all the millennials who are seeing this TikTok, I give you permission to throw your boxes out. You don't need them. You can get rid of them. And as like an elder millennial, I just kind of like looked to my left at this like row of boxes from various computer components and devices and stuff. And I'm like, I feel attacked.
Yeah. Why are they attacking me? Thank you, Tim. And our last one from Sonic Snedgehog. Sonic, you around? Or possibly not. I don't know Sonic's Zoom name, so maybe I'll just read them. This one, Bachelor's Handbag. Any guesses?
Bachelor's Handbag.
What could be a bachelor's handbag?
My brain immediately thinks of the way that the queer community uses handbag.
Okay.
So a handbag is is a lesbian version of a beard, right? So that is to say, a straight partner of a person, of a woman, to mask or socially hide the fact that she is a lesbian, right? So it would be a man, probably a straight man, possibly a gay man, I guess, who will be the handbag of a gay person who is passing as straight in social society. So I'm wondering if a bachelor's handbag is like some version of that somehow. I don't know.
I can tell you're leaning on the coded version of bachelor, as in committed bachelor.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Not quite. Who's got it? Who wants to throw this one out?
The only thing in my mind was fanny pack, but those are so dead. I hope they're still dead. I don't know.
like the mullet being back in. Oh, it is unfortunate.
All right, Lord Mortis, spill.
Actually, PharaohKatt, because we swapped computers.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. God damn it.
Sorry. I only know this because I saw it posted on the Discord, so I don't know if that's cheating or not.
Oh well.
This is a very Australian term, and it relates to when you go to Coles or Woolies, you can get a little barbecue cooked chook, and it's all hot, and it comes in a little bag
with handles.
So that's your yeah. It's got a little bag with little handles. You just pick it up and take it down to the checkout. That is a bachelor's handbag.
And you always want to get there after 5 p.m. so you can get your bachelor's handbag for like half price.
Yes.
Very good. That's fun. It's also been referred to as a tradies handbag. There's a funny article in the Batuta Advocate. I couldn't tell if some people thought that they originated it. The satirical newspaper, the Batuta Advocate. Local landscaper treats himself to the bachelor's handbag for Friday lunch. It's a fun one.
That is cute. I like that.
All right. So thank you all for those. So precariat, climate optimism, Ubi, meaning default, I'm going with this, the Jeloscope, Welloscope, Space Telescope, and the Bachelor's Handbag are words of the week. Just want to say a huge thanks to all of you for your support, your patronage, for being here today, and of course, all the stories and the discussion that you bring to Discord and to the show. And this is Because Language reminding you that no matter what anybody else does, wear a friggin' mask if you give a shit about other people. Thank you.
Yeah. It's back.
All right, Ben, do you want to take the first bit?
Where are our reads? Are they in the email?
Oh, shit. I forgot to give you the reads.
Should I just use the ones from the last week's
that'd be
run
good.
sheet? Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay. If you like the show, here are some of the many things that you can do. You can follow us on all of the socials. We are Because Lang Pod everywhere except Spotify. Boo, Joe Rogan.
Boo.
Leave us a message with SpeakPipe. That's on our website, and our website is becauselanguage.com. You can send us an email if you like the old-fashioned type of thing, hello@becauselanguage.com. You can join our Discord, but to do that you need to become a patron. We'll talk about that in a second. And really importantly, / really funly, if you like what we do, if you've listened to us and you're like, heck yeah, this is great, leave us a review somewhere. It doesn't have to be iTunes. iTunes is good, but it's not the only place. You can leave us a review in any of the many places that you listen to podcasts. I myself am not an Apple user. I use Pocket Casts. That could be one. You could use the Google Podcast app. Whatever you like. Leave us a review somewhere, and it is going to do us good.
You, our patrons, make it possible for us to make transcripts so that you can read our shows and search our shows. In how many episodes have we mentioned vanilla? Probably a few, and we're going to do it more.
And you can search it because of the things that patrons allow us to do.
Yep, and a big thanks to the entire team at SpeechDocs. They're doing a great job on our transcripts. And a shout out to our top patrons, Dustin, Termy, Crispy, Elias, Matt, Whitney, Chris L, Helen, Udo, Jack, PharaohKatt and Lord Mortis, Larry, Christopher, Andy B, James, Nigel, Meredith, Kate, Nasrin, Aisha, Moe, Steele, Manu, Rodger, Rianne, Colleen, Ignacio, Sonic, Snedgehog, Kevin, Jeff, Andy from Logophilios, Samantha, Stan, Kathy, Rosh, Cheyenne, Felicity, Amir, the Kenny Archer, Tim, Alyssa, Chris W, and of course KB, who didn't just lightly tap the one-time donation button on our website Because Language, she smashed it.
Gravhammer style.
That's right. Our theme music has been written and performed by Drew Kaplyanov, a member of Ryan Bino and of Ditte's Bible. Thanks for listening and for coming here. We'll catch you next time, because language. Everybody wave.
Well
Thanks all.
done.
That was great. Now let's see. It's possible that it's unlikely, but possible that my Zoom will crash, because it used to happen in the early days with this laptop, but it hasn't happened for a really long time. So if the whole session comes crashing down, give me a couple of minutes to restart. I'll dump a new link in Discord under the live patron EPs. But I think we're pretty good to go. We're recording. Ben looks
Can I
like
suggest something?
Yeah.
Make Ben a co-host, and then when you fall off, you can just come back onto the same link.
Yeah. Hey Ben, you're a co-host.
It's all coming together.
I feel like you've been a co-host for quite a while.
No. Finally, 6 years in, and my plan bears fruit.
Ben, you've I was just looking at the first episodes of Talk the Talk that you appeared in, and our earliest episodes were like 2011.
Good Lord.
Did you know this?
Fuck. Sorry. I mean,
February 2011 is the first one that I've got with you.
Man, I've got to update my little mental script. You know, when like you're in a conversation with someone and people are like, "Oh, really? Do you do a podcast?" And you're like, and you've got that little like 25 words or less, like, "Yeah, you know, I've been doing." I guess for the last, I don't know, 11 years, I've been saying about 5 years or so.
Yes, really you have. And I've always been looking at my watch, going, "Man, what Ben's sense of time."
What can I say? Now, at the tender age of 27, I've only been doing it for 5 years.
You're not. Anyway,
I'm so far away from 27.
You're not 27. Okay, good. Okay,
No.
just checking. Now you've got me worried about my sense. Are you gaslighting me? You bastard.
No, Daniel, I'm not gaslighting you. I'm insulting you. You old.
Okay, that's cool. I can take insults.
Yeah.